Out of the 118 elements of the periodic table, only 19 are named after people, some directly and some indirectly. Here is a look at the first 10 elements to be named after our fellow humans and how those names came to be. Number 1. Samarium. The very first element to be named after a person was discovered by French chemist Paul-Emile Lecoq de Boisbaudron. Samarium, with the atomic number 62, was named after the mineral Samarskite, from which Paul-Emile first isolated in 1879. Samarskite, the mineral, was discovered in the Ural Mountains of Russia in 1839 by German mineralogist Gustav Rose, and it was named after the Russian mine official Colonel Vassili Samarsky-Bykhovets, who had granted Rose access to the mineral samples in the Urals. Number 2. Gadolinium. 1 year after samarium was discovered, bearing atomic number 64, gadolinium was discovered in 1880 by the Swiss chemist Jean-Charles Galissard de Marignac and isolated in its pure form 6 years later in 1886 by Boisbaudron. Gadolinium is so named after the mineral gadolinite, one of the minerals in which it was extracted, and in turn, gadolinite was named after the Finnish mineralogist and chemist Johann Gadolin in 1800. Number 3. Americium. Moving into the 20th century and the heavier elements, the element with 95 protons was discovered in 1944 by the team at MetLab during the days of the Manhattan Project. After bombarding plutonium-239 with alpha particles, this element was produced. Glenn T. Seaborg, who worked on the project, thought it was appropriate to name the actinide element Americium to contrast its counterpart in the lanthanide series, element 63, europium. This would, indirectly, name the element after the namesake of the Americas, Amerigo Vespucci. Number 4. Curium. Discovered in 1944, the same year as Americium, and under similar circumstances, element 96 was found by the bombardment of plutonium-239 with alpha particles using the cyclotron at Berkeley, California. Element 96 was found to have 7 5f electrons and was analogous to the 7 4f electrons of gadolinium. So to maintain the similarities, the name curium was suggested in honor of Pierre and Marie Curie, the pioneers of polonium and radium, just as gadolinium was in honor of Johann Gadolin. Number 5. Berkelium. Discovered 5 years after curium, element 97 would be the 5th transuranium element to be found. The Berkeley group gives the following statement regarding its choice of name, saying, "It is suggested that element 97 be given the name Berkelium, symbol BK, after the city of Berkeley, in a manner similar to that used in naming its chemical homologue, terbium, atomic number 65, whose name was derived from the town Ytterby, Sweden, where the rare earth minerals were first found. Thus, indirectly, Berkelium was named after the Bishop George Berkeley, an 18th century Anglo-Irish philosopher who is the namesake for both the city and the school in California. Number 6. Einsteinium. The element with 99 protons was discovered just 3 years after berkelium in 1952 and was found in the debris of Ivy Mike, the very first hydrogen bomb explosion in 1952. Only a very small quantity of about 200 atoms were detected. Element 99 was named in the honor of Albert Einstein and, as with the next element, was very close to being the first element named after a living person, as the name was made official the same year but shortly after Einstein's passing in April of 1955. Number 7. Fermium. Element 100 was also discovered in the fallout of the first hydrogen bomb, as Einsteinium was, however, just shortly after in 1953. Due to the tensions of the Cold War, information on both elements were classified until 1955 and then published the same year. Element 100 was given the name after the man who was called the architect of the nuclear age, Enrico Fermi, and the name, just like Einsteinium, was proposed while Enrico was alive, though he passed in 1954 before the name fermium was made official in 1955. Number 8. Mendelevium. The element with 101 protons was discovered in 1955 by bombarding einsteinium with alpha particles, aka helium nuclei. 101 was named after Dmitry Mendeleev, the famous Russian chemist of the 19th century. Glenn T. Seaborg recalls back to the naming of the element, saying, "We thought it fitting that there be an element named for the Russian chemist Dmitry Mendeleev, who had developed the periodic table. In nearly all our experiments discovering transuranium elements, we depended on his method of predicting chemical properties based on the element's position in the table. But in the middle of the Cold War, naming an element for a Russian was a somewhat bold gesture that did not sit well with some American critics." Number 9. Nobelium. Officially discovered in 1966, yet with many claims for its discovery in the preceding decade, comes the 9th element granted a name after a person. There were 3 groups fighting for the claim of discovery for element 102. Soviet, American, and Swedish teams were all in contention and produced many claims to 102's inception, yet none of these were strongly accepted or verified. In 1992, it was concluded by the Transfermium Working Group that the Dubna team, then working in the Soviet Union, was the first correctly to detect the element in their work of 1966. However, the Swedish team's chosen name of Nobelium, after Alfred Nobel, was already being used for 3 decades, and scientific papers and discourse were saturated with Nobelium's use. It was kept as the name. Number 10. Lawrencium. Discovered in early 1961, element 103 was discovered by the team at Berkeley under Albert Ghiorzo by bombarding a 3 milligram target containing 3 isotopes of californium with the nuclei of boron-10 and boron-11. The element was given the name Lawrencium in honor of Ernest Lawrence, the inventor of the cyclotron, which was used in the discovery of many of the heavier elements. Lawrence passed away just 3 years before the element was named after him in 1958. And here is a closing snapshot of the remaining 9 elements named after our fellow humans. 104, Rutherfordium, in 1969, named after the Kiwi-born nuclear physicist Ernest Rutherford. 106, Seaborgium, in 1974, named after the American chemist Glenn T. Seaborg, and he would be the first living person with an element coined after him. 107, Bohrium, in 1981, named after the famous Danish quantum physicist Niels Bohr. 109, Meitnerium, in 1982, named after the Austrian-Swedish physicist Lise Meitner. 111, Roentgenium, in 1994, named after the German scientist Wilhelm Röntgen, who discovered X-rays. 112, Copernicium, in 1996, named after the famous astronomer and polymath Nicholas Copernicus. 114, Flerovium, in 1999, named after the Russian physicist Georgy Flyarov. 116, Livermorium, in 2000, named indirectly after Don Roberto Livermore, by whom both the city and laboratory in California was named after. And lastly, 118, and the final element of the periodic table, Oganesson, in 2002, named after the Russian-Armenian nuclear physicist Yuri Oganessian, who is still alive at the making of this video at the enduring age of 90 years old. We thank you for watching. If you did enjoy the video, feel free to like and drop some knowledge in the comments.